Now at this point you will intersperse the bit that I'm about to do with the AE1 and all the rest of it, Phil, so, you know, work your magic. Hello and welcome to an AVForums short video overview of the Acoustic Energy Corinium floor stander. My name is Ed Selley, I'm the Hi-Fi Editor for AVForums, and I'm going to try and talk you through some of the basics of this, and there will be a written piece to accompany the video which will cover more sort of sonic details and other things that I undoubtedly forget whilst talking to the camera. First and foremost, what is a corinium? Corinium is the ancient Roman name for what is now Cirencester, which is where Acoustic Energy is based. It's not to be confused with corian, a material which sometimes is actually used to make loudspeakers. There's none of that in here. It is a historical name for historical purposes. Now, history is important when we're talking about the corinium. This is a speaker that both looks forward and, in its own very particular way, deals with Acoustic Energy's past. Now, this is of particular interest to me because I'm rather invested in that past. So before we go any further with talking about the corinium, let's go right back to the beginning and where this all started. You might take one look at the corinium and not see any similarities whatsoever between the wholly obsolete AE1, and that's not necessarily a problem. But Acoustic Energy has managed to incorporate part of their past in their view of the future. If you see the two drivers which are actually in shot, I've been experimenting with various different ways of filming these speakers in my extremely dishevelled listening room, and this is about the least worst option, so we'll deal with that. If you look at these two drivers, you'll notice that they are fundamentally a two-way stand mount. They're attached to a larger cabinet, but the manner in which they are positioned relative to one another, their size, their general behaviour is very much akin to the original AE1. What the corinium is, at its most basic level, is a nod to Acoustic Energy's two-way stand mount past, but it extends that cabinet down and then places two bass drivers at the bottom to make this a 3.5-way design. And those two drivers at the bottom are best viewed as a passive subwoofer. It gives a nod to the Acoustic Energy tradition, and indeed a tradition with the LS35A and other broadcast monitors, of combining a small agile stand mount speaker with a bass solution to fill out the bottom octaves. In the case of the corinium, it's all done for you in one loudspeaker. Now, these drivers perhaps just as well have nothing to do with those origin points in the 1980s. Acoustic Energy has been experimenting with a number of interesting materials. In the case of the corinium, it's more experimentation again. Initial prototypes experimented with the carbon fibre tweeter that we saw in the 500 series speakers. But in the pursuit of something a little bit better, they've actually managed to use a material which is lighter still. It's a fabric-related substance. They're a little bit guarded about what it is and where it comes from, but it is lighter again than the carbon fibre driver, and that has improved response and high frequency breakup. This is partnered with carbon fibre drivers, which are more recognisably in keeping with what the company has been doing with the 500 series and indeed other models. Crossover points on this are extremely benign, and they sort of feed into my preferred practice, if I'm honest. It's a relatively high 3.4K crossover to the tweeter between the mid-range, and that mid-range doesn't hand over to the bass drivers until 260 Hz. So this is a busy driver, but I will say that in practice it seems to work extremely well. The performance of these drivers has been geared with a view to improving sensitivity over and above some of the older designs. Acoustic Energy claims 92 dB for 1 watt of input, and that seems to be pretty believable in use, but there is the caveat that this is achieved with a 4 ohm impedance. The Corinium is not the easiest speaker in the world to drive, but I wouldn't say that it's something where you're going to actually have to go out of your way to find an amplifier solution. On test here, it's been run with the Air EX8, for which there will be a review, and the long-standing resident Cambridge Audio Edge A, for which there is already a review on the site, both of which haven't really struggled. It's probably not going to be my choice for single-ended valve amplifiers, but so long as you aren't absolutely hell-bent on trying to drive them on something extremely low power, you should be absolutely fine. But it's worth bearing in mind that this is not perhaps as easy to drive a loudspeaker as that sensitivity figure might initially have you believe. All of this is placed inside a curved cabinet. This is something that Acoustic Energy has done before, but not for an extremely long time. It's in varying thicknesses depending on where it's being used inside the speaker, and it is, I have to say, based on the time I've spent with this one, enormously solid. If you run a hand against the side of the speaker whilst it's running or on the top plate, there is little to no energy being radiated away. It seems to be extremely dense. It also is extremely benign in terms of placement. Around the back you'll find a circular port and then if you like, a take on the slot port solution that we have seen in some other Acoustic Energy designs, but this time it's vertical and running along the thin flat section at the rear of the cabinet. These have been run for the most part about ½ metre out from the wall, and they have been entirely benign in that. Acoustic Energy's managing director, Matt Spandl, actually reckons in this space we could have probably got them a little bit closer still if needs be. So for what is a relatively large loudspeaker, placement is extremely straightforward. They are sensitive to distance between them. A little bit of care and attention needs to be placed to toe in, but these are not outliers at this sort of price point. There are a couple of plonk and play designs in play, no pun intended, but this is no harder than most of the field in terms of actually getting its placement. This room has solid floors and relatively solid walls, and that does seem to help it in dialing into spaces, but I would say that this is not one of the harder options that you can find at the price. Speaking of price, there are two price points for the Corinium. If you are content to have them in wood, black or white, they are £6,000. The review pair here are in a green finish. Now, it's referred to as British Racing Green. I have to be a pedant here, it's not. British Racing Green is a dreadful colour. It's sort of the colour of pond water. This is a Bentley-derived green metallic option, and it's absolutely lovely. It is, however, a £1,000 price premium, so these ones would set you back £7,000. It's not for me, the world's least stylish man, to tell you whether it's worth the effort or not, but I think personally, in my valueless opinion, that this is one of the nicer looking loudspeakers and one of the more interesting colour options that you can find at this price point. Sonically, the Corinium has managed to walk a very, very delicate and very, very impressive balance. Acoustic Energy was honest enough to admit that they've benchmarked a number of loudspeaker designs, including some speakers that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be having a look at in the pursuit of what they want the Corinium to sound like. Nevertheless, the result has been quite interesting. This is a more fluid, a more beguiling loudspeaker than I was perhaps expecting it to be. Now, I come with a caveat that I was expecting it to be. What I want from an Acoustic Energy speaker as an AE1 owner is that I want it to go like the clappers. When I put some of my more uncouth music on, I want it to be a wholly arresting experience. The really impressive thing for me is that the balance that I mentioned earlier is that when I do want to listen to cretinous music from the 90s altogether too loudly, this speaker still leans on. It still goes for it in a way that I find wholly and meaningfully invigorating. But it does that with an ability to sound rich, involving, tonally realistic and extremely spacious at the same time. It's akin to manufacturers managing to get their 2-ton SUVs to go round corners. This speaker has tricks and abilities that are not in the playbook of its ancestors, but when you want it to be a bit of a laugh a minute, it absolutely is a laugh a minute, and that really is a very impressive balance as far as I'm concerned. In terms of whether I would buy the Acoustic Energy Corinium, that's going to be an interesting one, and one I have to actually hold off judgment for. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with these speakers, and you know, the review is going to be extremely positive and reflect that. They are, however, being followed through this space by the recently announced Bowers & Wilkins 702 Signature, which comes in at the same price as the Corinium in the green, so they're same price to the penny. Early indications when I listened to that in a different space were that it was extremely impressive. I'm not going to call a winner until I've had both of them here and I've played equally creatinous music on my equipment through both of them. I do think that the Corinium is very much going to hold its own against the Bowers & Wilkins, and I suspect that there are some elements of its performance that I'm going to consider to be superior. Whether it comes out as an out-and-out winner, we shall see. I would say that if you are shopping for a floor stander at this relatively elevated price point, this one has to go on the list. It's extremely impressive, it's beautifully made, I happen to think it's rather attractive, and it represents Acoustic Energy stepping up into a new price point and putting the effort, the thought, and the general determination to be more than a manufacturer of you know, relatively affordable loudspeakers. You can understand where it's come from, you can recognise that it is an Acoustic Energy, you can also recognise that it has functions and abilities that are wholly beyond anything I've tested from Acoustic Energy before. If you've enjoyed this review, good for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. There will be more of them. Please also go on to avforums.com and read my slightly less stuttery written review of this. I still prefer words over video as a medium to actually get my thoughts down in a meaningfully sort of ordered way. But nevertheless, the videos will continue. There will be more of them. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.